Hey everyone, welcome back to On the Grid, and today we'll take a look at the historic and iconic tracks of the past that are all available in Automobilista 2. If you ever hear a petrol head talking about racing, it will always and inevitably lead to the statement that the best racing was in the 70s. There was nothing like racing in the 80s, or the 90s was the pinnacle of racing. Depending on the age group, it will all vary. Regardless of which era it is, there is one common thread between those, and that's the tracks that they were held on. I'm a big fan of watching old classic races, TV broadcasts with that sepia tone and oversized billboards. There was something about those that when sitting in your living room, you can almost smell the petrol in the air. And anyone who's had the opportunity to attend a race from those eras will know the feeling of engine vibrations running through your body and that ear-piercing sound of the V12s and the V10s. It is in stark contrast to the pristine, well-groomed, and smooth as silk tracks we have today. Engines have of course evolved and controversially become quieter, which I still have a hard time letting go. Yeah, I might need to get some therapy to accept the eFuture engines. Well, we can't really call them engines, can we? Well, anyway, regardless, you just have to take any classic car and any vintage track in AMS2, which arguably has the most of any sim, at least natively. So let's take a look back and appreciate what these tracks have given us. Hockenheim 1977. This track opened in 1938 and it's still quite active today. It's the track that unfortunately took the life of Jim Clark back in 1968. If you had the opportunity to see an old live footage of Nelson Piquet and Salazar having their boxing match live on circuit, that was a pretty entertaining moment. In 2002, Hermann Tilke revised the nearly 7-kilometer track. And I think the cost of those modifications would eventually lead to the continued financial troubles for Hockenheim, much like Nürburgring, which would end up seeing these two tracks share the F1 Grand Prix calendar. This layout, which has corners like Bremskurve 1 and 2, are really great overtaking opportunities if you get it right. Then leading into the stadium section and Sachskurve, which is still there today, and onto the straight. This track provides some great racing action. Imola 1988. Probably one of my top favorite tracks in any sim or just in any circuits. As much as this circuit is loved, it really comes with an air of sadness every time we mention Imola. We lost the greatest racer in my opinion, and probably one of the main reasons I started watching F1, and that's Ayrton Senna. In 1950, when this opened up, Enzo Ferrari was on hand to witness the first stone being laid for what would become this iconic track today. Probably the most talked about corner is Tamburello. Fast, bumpy, and dangerous, and after what happened in '94, would end up being revised with the added chicane. One of my favorite corners on this circuit is the final right before the straight. It just brings me back to those moments in early 90s when I was watching racing. There's so much history on this track, and it's great to see all the variants here in AMS2. And we have been lucky to have this on the Formula 1 circuit the last 2 years. Hopefully we'll see more of it. Interlagos 1976. There is something special about this track. It was built in the 40s, and there is definitely a love-hate relationship with the track. Drivers love it, but there's so much political issues surrounding the circuit and its safety over the years. This layout, this specific one, was at a time when the track was very rough, there was a lot of bumps, and it led to a lot of dangerous incidents. The Autodromo Jose Carlos Pache is named after the driver who won the '76 GP, and unfortunately he died later that year. This is one track I really love to run in AMS2 because it makes you feel like you're in that era. It makes you feel like you're back in the 70s. It works so well with pretty much every category of cars. If you haven't run a race on this variation, then get out there right now, grab a vintage Formula or even the M1 Pro car and tell me it doesn't make you feel great. Kyalami 1976. Kyalami means my home. And I'm sure there are many hidden gems in South Africa, and this is thankfully one we get to have, both modern version and the classic variation. I would love to see more of the variations, especially the original layout. This track opened in '61 with the Rand Spring Trophy, which included Formula 1, Formula 2, and the 5000 series. Right from the barbecue bend on, you begin a series of left-rights consistently until the final kink. Go back to '76 footage of Lauda and Hunt crossing the finish line with a hair's length apart, and you'll get chills down your spine. Later in the 1980s, this circuit was moved further down the hill on cheaper land because it was just too costly where it was originally. And since it has gone through many revisions, it is nonetheless a great circuit, especially for GT racing. Every single corner is as challenging as the next, which makes this track so good. I would really love to see more layouts of Kyalami, and maybe even a few more tracks from South Africa. Killarney, anyone? And of course, there's Monza, the 1971 layout, the 10K layout, and this was just added into AMS2. Talk about historic tracks, and one of the first on the list would be Monza. I remember visiting this track a few years ago, and just driving into the site, you feel this special energy. You can almost hear the Tifosi echoes in the background. This is a post-World War I track. In 1922, the foundation would begin for this iconic track. And of course, as tends to happen, politics would be the issue to get this track built. However, it was finally approved, and imagine, it was built in 110 days. There was a lot of tragedy in those early years though, for both drivers and spectators. It would eventually lead to the circuit getting modifications. The full bank circuit returned only for a short period in 1961, when a driver and spectators were once again killed. That would be the demise of the banked circuit. It would undergo so many slight variations in the name of safety over the years, but the '71 layout was the last of the dangerous high-speed variations. This track is classic in every sim. So maybe now, with a few more layouts, we can actually have some multiplayer races not on the standard modern Monza. Silverstone 1991. This is another classic that has been around since the early 40s, with many layouts and each of them great in their own right. I think probably my favorite layout though is this 91 version, and it's really when I started getting into F1 and playing video games as well. This was the first track that was on the F1 World Championship back in 1950. Every race discipline has been held here, and for good reason. This is really the home of motorsport. And talk about corner names. You could even argue that the corners are probably more popular than the circuit itself, like Hanger Straight, Stowe, Club, Cops, Maggots, Beckett's, you name it. Even somebody who doesn't play video games very much or watches racing would have heard of these names. The 90s though were really when the series of corners that formed the new Maggots, Beckett's, and Chapel sequence was created. And that really only made for faster high-speed action, and which many, including myself, absolutely loved. And probably one of the number one reasons I like this layout is specifically because of this infield section, which resembles a lot of the Hockenheim Stadium sector. And I really like it because you're coming into this infield where you see all the stadium, you see all the fans there, and especially if you're leading a race, you could see a lot of excitement in the stands. So really motivating for a driver, for sure. Spa 1993, another classic. Topping it off with a trio. You cannot include this track. I know there are other layouts coming down the road to AMS2, but for now we have two, and the 93 version is the one we have here. This is a global favorite track. Talk about famous corner names, and Spa is loaded with them. Eau Rouge and Radion, of course, but there is also Les Combes, Blanchiment, La Source, and my favorite in this layout is the bus stop, the early edition of the bus stop. If you go back and imagine, the early layouts were even more dangerous than Eau Rouge today, with a lot of major crashes happening out of Malmedy. The track had major revisions done in '79, which would become the Spa we know today. The 93 version though had the famous bus stop, which I actually prefer over the current version. And I actually really enjoy this sequence here. If you get hooked up right and you got your car on the perfect racing line, especially through these right right turn, right left here before Stavlat. It really feels good. Probably my second favorite sequence of corners. And then of course out onto Blanchiment. And as I said already, I really preferred the old version of the bus stop because you're coming from Blanchiment really flat out and then hit this quick left and back into right onto the straight. There was just something I really liked about that, but I think unfortunately it had to be changed and modified due to the pit lane. If I'm not mistaken, the pit lane had to be extended or pulled back a little bit, which is why they changed the layout of the bus stop. All these tracks are amazing in their own right. And of course, there are many classic circuits out there, and hopefully a part 2 can happen if and when Razor releases more of these historic layouts. I hope you enjoyed that quick look at some of the old tracks that are available in AMS2. I would really encourage you to get out there and try them out. Hopefully we see more multiplayer matches on these old classic circuits instead of the traditional modern day circuits. And so, as always guys, I appreciate you watching. Please subscribe, hit the like button, and we'll catch you guys again really soon. Until next time, take care.